Hello and welcome to another episode of the Pronunciation Critique Series. My name is Joe Previtt, the founder of English Byte, and I'm stoked to have you here today. If this is your first time in the Pronunciation Critique Series, the thing that I want to point out is the reason I like to do these is because we're looking for patterns. So when you're trying to reduce your accent or improve your pronunciation, it can be helpful to look at other people and see what sticks out about their accent. Because then once you can recognize that pattern, you can start to recognize it in your own accent and your own pronunciation. So that's the whole point of this series. Today we're going to be diving into someone really awesome who is a founder of a company. So a little bit different than our typical developer. He is technical, so he does fit into the engineer category. But yeah, without further ado, let's jump in. So today we're going to be critiquing Esteban Dalel R, who is a founder. He runs his own company. I believe he's based in Colombia, and we're going to be watching an interview that he does with someone else and critiquing him. So I have it pulled up here. He's one of the hosts, or he's the person in the yellow jacket. So we're going to be watching about a minute of his speaking. And after we do that, we are going to watch it again, and I'll pause and critique. So let's do it. And we might have to watch a little bit more because we have the guest, so I might be skipping around a little bit.
Welcome to another Watermelon podcast. I'm Esteban, the other one, and I'm here with Diego Rodriguez. He's been programming since he was 16. He's a committer for WebTorrent, which is torrents on the web. They have a browser to stream movies around a peer-to-peer network, and now works with Filecoin, but I'll let him tell you about it. Hello, Diego. How are you doing?
All right. Hey, Esteban. So just to correct you on one point, I started coding when I was 12, not 16. So it's been over for.
I know Ferris, wasn't it? How big is it?
I would say the contributors on it with that's.
Before we move into your current job, I'd like to talk a little bit about being an open source maintainer. Watermelon is an open source thing, and it's actually pretty cool having people contribute, but it's also tiresome. How has your experience been? How did you get into open source? What would you recommend to a person that wants to get into open source?
Cool. Okay, so apologies for this skipping around a little bit. Let's go back to 20 seconds and analyze his pronunciation. So we'll go back right about here.
Watermelon podcast. I'm Esteban, the other one.
There we go.
Welcome to another Watermelon podcast.
So watermelon is kind of what I'm hearing, versus it's kind of more like watermelon might sound more like what a native speaker would say.
I'm Esteban, the other one, and I'm here with Diego Rodriguez. He's been programming since he was 16.
Programming. That one, something about the vowels there. I think that one is what I hear a lot, the H sound, like somebody who's a non-native English speaker, typically native language is Spanish. He's versus like he's. It's very subtle, very subtle.
Committer.
I think it's the schwa sound. Committer.
Torrent, which is torrents on the web. They have a browser to stream movies around a peer-to-peer network.
Peer, right versus like peer.
And now works with Filecoin.
Actually, and I want to turn on the captions too. There we go.
But I'll let him tell you about it.
So one thing that I do want to point out though is like his intonation sounds like a native speaker. He's like, oh, but I'll let him tell you about it, right? That instead of like, I'll let tell you him about it, I'll let you tell, or sorry, let's hear that one more time. Because it does sound like a native speaker.
Filecoin, but I'll let him tell you.
So sorry, here, what I want to point out is the the emphasis in his voice, which is very subtle when he says, but I'll let him tell you about it, right? Because we want to emphasize that basically what Esteban is saying is, right, like, I'm not going to give the best intro. Like, I'll let you, or I'll let him tell you more about it, right? Him is the emphasis here. So he does a great job with his intonation.
You about it. Hello, Diego. How are you doing?
Hello, Diego. How are you doing? I guess, yeah. How you doing? Like that, you might shorten that too. Like, how you doing? Right? Like, literally, if I were to write, how you doing? I don't know if actually you won't be able to see that. Like, almost like if you're saying it like that. Like, how you doing? If that makes sense.
All right. Hey, Steve. I'm a
This project, right? I know. Cool. That's a very big open source.
And like his utterances, right? I just said he said like he's got that down. So that's another thing that I want to point out that he's doing well.
Project, right? I know Ferris, wasn't it?
There's something about the vowels that is like slightly off. Like, his speed's good, his intonation's good. He obviously can express himself in the moment, like on the spot. It's something about the vowels that's...
How big is it?
How big is it? Versus like, how big is it? There's something so subtle there.
I would say 4 brackets are being. That's my
Talk a little.
job.
Okay. Before we move into your current job, I'd like to talk a little bit about being an open source maintainer.
Maintainer.
Watermelon is an open source thing, and
Watermelon.
it's actually pretty cool.
There, another thing. So notice how his voice rose a little bit. How he's like, it's actually pretty cool. Like that, again, these are like things that a native speaker might do naturally, which I think he's really gotten down.
An open source maintainer. Watermelon is an open source thing, and
Watermelon is an open source thing.
it's actually pretty cool having people contribute, but it's
Contribute versus contribute. So they're just the stress.
also tiresome. How
See, again, like he's like, it's also tiresome. Like, again, this is really hard to get down. I think you have to reach a pretty high level of fluency to get the emphasis down. You know, notice how there he like had emphasis on tiresome, right? That's what that's the point he's trying to make.
it's actually pretty cool having people contribute, but it's also tiresome. How has your experience been?
Right. So like these questions, like he seems like a native speaker. You know, if you were to take some of these clips.
How did you get into open source?
How? I don't know if it's like the O in that, like how. I'm wondering if his mouth isn't opening up enough, which I feel like we've talked about in other critiques.
Tiresome. How has your experience been? How did you get into open source?
Like if you notice his lips, like they only really go like this, which is, I think if he opened his mouth a little bit more, you might get more of that, like native speaker.
So tiresome. How has your experience been?
How has your experience been?
How did you get into open source?
How did you get into open source? So again, he's doing a great job of that emphasis.
What would you recommend?
What? Right. So like what? I'm trying to figure out what the difference is. There's something in the what there.
To a person that wants to get into
Something with the W's, because wants to.
open source.
So
Yeah, we'll stop there. I'll drop a link to this in the description if you want to watch the whole thing. It's about 22 minutes. And the other thing I'll mention,
let's start with context.
quick.
How did I get into open?
I'll drop a link to that actually because I don't think it's loading. Cool. So yeah, that's the pronunciation creek for today. Thanks for watching. Again, the whole point of this is to figure out what are the patterns that you want to steal. So from Esteban's here, the things I would point out are emphasis on words and intonation and flow. He's got those down like a native speaker. It felt very natural listening and watching to this, or listening to this podcast or this interview. The things that he could work on, some of the vowels, the W's, there were a couple words, very, very small details that could help him. But yeah, that's it. I think, he's a great example of somebody who's reached a high level of fluency, and that's kind of what you want to strive for. It's going to help you land a remote dev job, and it's going to help you along your whole career. Cool. So thanks for watching. If you're new here, head over to EnglishByte.com. We have a free newsletter which goes out every Monday and has 5 tips to help you improve your English. Go ahead and sign up. The more subscribers we get, the more content we can make like this.